Hello, everyone. My name is Robbie Bach. I want to welcome you to our webinar today, The Future of Reality, the Potential Impact of Augmented and Virtual Reality. By way of introduction, I'm the current chair of the board at the Bipartisan Policy Center. I worked at Microsoft for 22 years, and my last 10 years, I was the founder and the person running the Xbox business. So I have a little bit of context for today's discussion for sure. I now do a lot of civic and nonprofit work, but I also do some consulting and board work in the augmented reality and virtual reality space. And I'm very excited about the topic we're going to discuss today. I want to kick off today's session by noting that the Bipartisan Policy Center has been focused, in particular most recently, on bringing technology issues to the forefront and ensuring that we're having policy discussions on the technology space in advance, so that as new technologies come about, we can be prepared from a policy perspective. I think too often today we're sort of chasing technology with policy, and it would be nice for those things to be sort of moving in pace together. As a case in point, our recent AI initiative, we worked with Representatives Will Hurd and Robin Kelly to put together a series of reports that helped guide a House resolution for an AI national strategy that passed the House last year. So today, the BPC is excited to be partnering with the XR Association to study immersive technologies like virtual and augmented reality. And XRA represents that industry and really are the experts on the technology and the direction we're going. I'm also pleased today to welcome Congresswoman Susan Delben as one of our keynote speakers. And the only reason I highlight that is because she and I work together at Microsoft, and she actually is my congresswoman and represents my district. So I'm really proud to see our local area represented and to see Susan able to represent us so well here today. So with that, I want to introduce someone else who has deep knowledge in this entire area. Please welcome Liz Hyman, who is the CEO of the XR Association. Liz, take it away.
Hey, Robbie, thank you. Thanks so much. I'm truly excited to join you today. And yes, the XR Association is a nonprofit trade association, and we represent the broad ecosystem of the XR industry. And this includes our founding members, who are the leading hardware manufacturers and technology platforms in this space. Before we dive into the program today, I wanted to take a quick moment to make sure that we're all familiar with the immersive technology that we'll be talking about today. First off, XR is an umbrella term for virtual, augmented, and mixed reality, and even immersive technologies that have yet to be invented. But let me start with what we are talking about today. So I want to start with virtual reality, and hopefully you all can see a slide that on the left is a representation of VR. It's a fully immersive experience into a new digitally generated setting by replacing the user's view, typically via a head-mounted display. Now, you can also go into a virtual world on a computer, and I've seen this done in conference settings, for example, where you can join either in 3D or 2D, but obviously using your computer is a little less immersive. But to put a fine point on this and sort of get you in the mood, think of an immersive experience that you are trying for the very first time, something you would otherwise never do, like jumping out of an airplane, skydiving, and you are flying out with the horizon about you, your fellow skydivers nearby. You're looking down at the ground. It is rapidly coming up into your view. That is an immersive experience. That's VR. It's very exciting. That's a little different from augmented reality. This is more of a pass-through display where you have full understanding of your physical world, but you have data and information that is being layered on top of that real physical world. I love some of the retail applications where you kind of try before you buy. So you could be sitting in your living room and testing out a new sofa that you wanted to experience in your real surroundings. And this can be done either through a mobile device or also a head-mounted display. And then finally, mixed reality. This is a really interesting area where we're merging physical and virtual worlds to produce new environments and visualizations where physical, digital objects and users all coexist and interact real-time via a head-mounted display and across mobile devices. And more we're seeing this in various settings like manufacturing floors, or where teams can collaborate on a prototype designing a car, even if that team is dispersed across different geographic locations. So that's a quick summary of what XR is. And in the past year, if it has shown us nothing else, challenges with distance learning, telework, telemedicine, and other virtual applications during this pandemic underscores the imperative for better and more effective ways to connect, communicate, collaborate, and learn. And that's precisely the promise of XR. Yet we know that there is much to be done in terms of sharing and elaborating on all these amazing use cases and exploring what the impact is on our society. What are the reasonable expectations for use when it comes to things like privacy or social interaction, accessibility, and more? And at the XR Association, we're exploring all these topics and developing tools and engaging in research that can help address some of these questions. But we know that immersive technologies raise complexities that are not easily resolved. And that is why the XR Association wanted to partner with the Bipartisan Policy Center. BPC has an unparalleled reputation for convening diverse sets of stakeholders to explore the promise of such technologies, but to also help foster a constructive dialogue that we hope will set some of the frameworks for how immersive technologies move forward. We have a lot of innovation left to go, but we're deeply committed to our mission of responsible development of XR that we hope will yield positive societal outcomes. And that's a perfect segue to introduce our first two speakers this afternoon. We're extremely fortunate to have Congresswoman Delben and Senator Todd Young kick off this session. Let me say a brief word about each of them. First of all, Congresswoman Delben represents Washington's 1st congressional district, first elected to the House in 2012. She brings a really unique voice, as Robbie alluded to, with more than 2 decades of experience as a successful technology entrepreneur and business leader. She is the vice chair of the influential House Ways and Means Committee. And in the 116th Congress, Representative Delben was appointed to the Select Committee on Modernization of Congress. And this was created to find ways to improve and modernize the way Congress operates. And we hope XR will be part of that conversation as well. We're extremely fortunate to have her serve as one of the founders and co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Virtual, Augmented, and Mixed Reality Technologies. We affectionately refer to that as the Reality Caucus. And we very much look forward to the Congresswoman's remarks today. But before I do that, let me introduce our first speaker, Senator Todd Young of Indiana. And Senator Young currently serves on the Commerce Committee and notably is the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Space and Science. He also serves on the Senate Committees on Foreign Relations, Finance, Small Business, and Entrepreneurship. He's a 5th-generation Hoosier. Senator Young is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, where he graduated with honors in 1995 and accepted a commission in the U.S. Marine Corps. And that, he has consistently answered the call of public service, successfully running for a seat in the House of Representatives, and now representing the state of Indiana in the United States Senate since 2017. We're grateful for his leadership as a co-sponsor of the Endless Frontier Act, an important bipartisan, bicameral legislative proposal to add investment and focus to advance science and technological research and development. We're grateful for his commitment to this important legislation, and we hope that immersive technologies will be a part of the suite of technologies that the legislation addresses. So with that, I am very honored to hand the baton off to Senator Young.
Well, thank you so much for the generous introduction, Elizabeth, and so good to be with all of you for this opportunity to speak about the future of reality. It's a broad category, but specifically, I know we'll be touching on how immersive technologies will reshape how we interact with the world and interact with one another. In order to meet these new challenges, we have to once again show the entire world the resiliency and dynamism of the American people, our economy, the American spirit, and I would dare say the American project itself. The Endless Frontier Act, which was mentioned in my introduction, is something that I authored along with Senator Schumer. And with this legislation, we aim to bolster U.S. leadership in science and tech innovation. We propose to do this by boldly increasing pre-market investment in emerging tech. We would provide $100 billion in strategic investment in the National Science Foundation to bolster science and tech research and development. We would deliver $10 billion to establish regional tech hubs across the country to launch innovative companies, revive American manufacturing, and create new jobs to jumpstart our local communities. And in coming years, we propose strengthening American power and increasing American prosperity by carrying on America's never-ending quest to continuously improve the world through innovation. We've done it before. We will be doing it again. I have high confidence. Implementing the Endless Frontier Act will reinvest in American innovation, prevent us from being outflanked by other countries like China, and it will pave the way for what I like to call the second American century. On that same note, I'd be remiss not to highlight that my legislation will specifically support the great work that the XR Association is doing on virtual and augmented reality. Applying this technology to industries beyond gaming and entertainment will provide great value to, for example, healthcare, workforce training, education, to name just a few areas. When life resumes as normal, this generation of Americans mustn't be content with merely recovering our losses. Instead, we must be equipped and ready to lead the world. Otherwise, someone will step into the breach and assume that mantle. So I look forward to working with all of you on that ambitious goal. I look forward to your counsel and our cooperative efforts moving forward. And I, of course, look forward to working with Congresswoman Delben in light of all of her expertise in this area as well. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks, Senator. It's great for me to be here as well. I am excited to join everyone. I want to thank Liz and Robbie and the Bipartisan Policy Center for having us. It's great to be with you virtually. I guess that's really what we're all talking about now as we go through this, the incredible impact technology has had and that it can have going forward. I want to talk about some of the opportunities, some of the challenges that we face as we look forward to more use of augmented virtual mixed reality, and some of the things that Congress, I think, needs to keep in mind and address as we go forward. Definitely over the past year, as we've continued to struggle with the global pandemic, we've seen a rise in the use of technology in our everyday lives. I think all of us have the new normal is to sit and be on video conference for folks most of the day. Some virtual discussions like this one, to reliance on remote classrooms, to the surge that we've seen in the use of telemedicine. And while we have tragically lost so many and so much to this pandemic, the experience has definitely illustrated the array of ways that technology can benefit our lives. Augmented and virtual reality has the potential to enhance many areas and the potential that we're just starting to understand and explore. So when we talk about medicine, medical students using augmented reality to learn and practice their field in a safe and controlled environment. Augmented reality can provide surgeons with improved sensory perception, making procedures safer and improving health outcomes. We talk a lot about medicine. It's definitely not the only industry in which technologies can be used. Virtual and augmented reality can benefit a range of industries, including engineering, manufacturing, construction, even tourism. AR, VR, XR can even help government increase efficiency and creativity through city planning and the development of transportation projects. Software is already instrumental in engineering and the design of a range of goods. And now if we have augmented and virtual reality, we can help designers better understand the consumer experience. They can interact with products or designs before they go into production. And this technology can also be used to enhance safety measures to ensure that planes or cars or even our homes can withstand or are prepared for emergencies or natural disasters. As teachers are finding new ways to keep students engaged, augmented and virtual reality can provide students with interactive ways to engage with the material they're learning. Students can travel to places and environments that would be too costly or unsafe to see in the real world. So as we better explore the different learning styles that students develop, we know that virtual and augmented reality can enhance the understanding of those who are visual and physical learners. So the potential is incredible, especially for those seeking an education at a trade or vocational school. We know that a mixed reality or XR can provide students with the opportunity to work through scenarios multiple times without additional costs or inconveniences as they learn, but also to access technologies or designs that would be hard for a school to acquire and have students work on or to keep up to date, whereas we can keep up to date with a virtual technology. It can play a role in how we connect with each other when we can't physically be in the same space. So we find ourselves in a room with our friends or even loved ones, and even if we're hundreds of miles away from each other, it's much more fulfilling than just the video calls when we're all fatigued from the past year. So I strongly believe in the potential benefits that these technologies can have on improving our world. That's why I've been a lead on the VR Techs in Government Act, which would create a federal advisory committee on the usability of reality technologies within the federal government. Also, as new technologies entered the marketplace, one challenge is ensuring that members of Congress and their staff are informed and educated about technology, as well as the benefits or the concerns that those technologies might present. So if policymakers aren't educated and comfortable with the topic, it's difficult for them to engage or understand what solutions might be available. And technology is a very big example of that. So since I came to Congress with a background in technology, I know it's important to do my part to help educate my colleagues. That's why I'm a co-founder and co-chair of the Reality Caucus. As these technologies continue to foster information sharing between Congress and our nation's world-leading technology industries, the caucus is going to work to bring people together. And as these technologies develop, questions will inevitably arise around privacy, intellectual property, as well as other issues. And our caucus allows us to educate our colleagues and others to ensure that Congress is doing all it can to encourage rather than hinder innovation in these enterprising fields. So the Reality Caucus has a strong bipartisan history, and I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle and bicamerally to support innovation and address the challenges that come up. One big challenge I just want to talk about briefly is that we need to address is the issue of privacy. We don't have a federal consumer data privacy standard in the United States. We have some states working on who have laws like California or others who are working on them, but a patchwork of state laws won't work in a digital world. We see augmented, virtual, and mixed reality technologies as they continue to develop. We need to make sure that people understand what their rights are and how their personal information could be used. VR gaming session can record millions of points of data in just 20 minutes, from the configuration of your room to your unique patterns of movement. And as it stands now, there's no real limit on what companies can do with sensitive information. So we have to make sure that people are aware of what information might be collected, make sure that we have controls and processes of that data that are using it in the way they're required to or they're authorized to in a transparent and responsible way. And so I've introduced legislation last Congress and working to introduce it again, the Information Transparency and Personal Data Control Act, so that by working with a variety of stakeholders, industry, consumer groups, we create a balanced approach for consumers and businesses to make sure that people know what their rights are, that they're clear and described in plain English, that consumers have the ability to opt out of sharing their most sensitive personal information, and to make sure that that consumers know their rights across the country. So we're behind on setting a national standard, and we already have seen others internationally working hard. The EU has not been shy about its desire to have GDPR set as a global standard for data protection. So we need a clear domestic policy. So we have a seat at the international table. So I'm very passionate about privacy. I'm hopeful that we can work on both sides of the aisle and pass federal privacy legislation this Congress, because it's foundational to so many issues, including issues like augmented and virtual reality. So again, thank you for inviting me to discuss this today. I'm excited the work that's happening here. And now I want to turn it over to John from the Bipartisan Policy Center for his comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Hi, I'm John Sarushian. I am the Associate Director of Corporate Governance and Technology at the Bipartisan Policy Center. I want to thank all our previous speakers for their interesting opening remarks. And, you know, it's a fascinating topic. I'm learning a lot. Hopefully we learn a lot from our expert panel, which I am actually about to introduce right now. So let us start with Dr. Jackie Bailey. She is an assistant professor at the University of Texas Austin School of Information. Hi, Jackie. And next is Michelle Richardson. She is the Director of Privacy and Data at the Center for Democracy and Technology. And finally, we have Owen Larder. He is the Director of Public Policy for the Office of Responsible AI at Microsoft. Thank you all for joining. And for the audience, we will be taking questions during this event, so feel free to submit any you have online. So with that, let's start with the first question. Can you all tell us, and we'll start with you, Jackie, can you tell us all a bit more about yourselves and how you got interested in immersive technologies?
Great, thanks, John, for the introduction. I'm happy to talk about that today. Happy to talk with all of you. So when I got interested into this area, I graduated from college, and I originally was working at a startup company looking at online programs to promote health and reduce the risk of mental disorders. And I was on the content development team. And then I ended up working full-time as a research assistant on an online program to help women who are comorbid with body image issues and anxiety and depression who are at high risk for eating disorders. And the online module, they'd read some information, they'd go about that and kind of have a discussion on a forum. And I really wanted to think about what would it mean if people could have more of an immersive experience, if there was more role playing where they could interact and do different things to help them go through this process, to help them learn these skills. And then I learned after that that all the people doing the really interesting and fun things had the PhD. So I went back to grad school to get the PhD and really focus on doing that work. And now I'm at the University of Texas at Austin, where I have a lab where I research and investigate immersive and interactive technologies across the lifespan. So I do work looking at youth and children. How do they experience these technologies, such as virtual reality? How does their social and their cognitive abilities affect how they interact with these technologies? Thinking about it in terms of education as well, social connections, and then also doing some projects looking at digital assistants such as Alexa or Siri, and how kids evaluate and think about those technologies as well. I'm excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to the great conversation we're going to have today.
Thank you, Jackie. And let's turn to you, Michelle, next. That works.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm the director of the Privacy and Data Project here at the Center for Democracy and Technology. And if you haven't worked with us before, we're a nonprofit based in DC and Brussels. We work on everything from open internet to law enforcement access issues, but I really specialize in corporate practices. In the last couple of years, we've spent most of our time on privacy and AI. So this seems to be a very natural avenue for us to research and weigh in on. And it's always exciting to try to hit a rising technology as it's still evolving. I don't want to downplay the many years that it's already gone into development, but very different conversations you get to have with companies and government actors when something is still being developed and important decisions are being made. So it's a great time to intervene, try to make sure that this generation of technology is even better than the ones we have, that it treats people more fairly and respects people's privacy. But I know we're going to get to that with further questions, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about it further.
Thanks, Michelle. And Owen, your turn.
Thanks very much, John. And it's great to be here today. Very much looking forward to the conversation. So my name is Owen Larter. I sit in a team that is the Office of Responsible AI at Microsoft. So this is a team that is headed up by Natasha Crampton, who is our Chief Responsible AI Officer. We do a couple of things, really. We work with colleagues across Microsoft to ensure that when we're developing these new cutting-edge technologies, we're building robust governance systems to make sure that they're being developed and deployed in a way that is responsible. And then there's also another bit of the team that I sit in, which is the public policy team, which takes the knowledge that we have as a company, both around where cutting edge technology is going, so artificial intelligence and the immersive technologies that we're talking about today, and shares that externally as part of the public policy conversation to make sure that we can build robust guardrails so that everyone can realize the opportunity of this technology, but can do so that in a way that is responsible. And it's a fascinating team to be in. It's a fascinating company to be at, because I've always really enjoyed working on technology issues. I've always really enjoyed studying the impact of technology, particularly the longer term trends and what adoption of technology means for society and all the fantastic things that they can do with it. And I think that's one of the reasons we're really excited about immersive technologies, because we do see this as a long-term trend, a new medium of computing that is developing. And I think in the same way that we've seen in sort of more conventional digital technologies, this shift from technology being very visible, actually quite intrusive. You think not that long ago about having computers that couldn't really fit comfortably in a room, to now computers that will fit comfortably in your pocket. And actually, we increasingly interact with computers all the time without even realizing that we're doing it. I think you're seeing the same shift in immersive technologies as well. And there's been a really rapid phase of development in recent years, so that some of this really clunky big hardware that was slightly difficult to use is actually increasingly accessible, increasingly affordable, and increasingly usable. So I think, as others were saying, we're right at the start of a really exciting journey to see just how you can use this technology across society and across the economy.
Thanks, Owen. Yeah, I think it's an exciting journey to sort of look into this new technology. So let's begin the journey with the next question. So people often talk about here augmented reality, here virtual reality, they think video games, they think entertainment. But that's not true, as we kind of heard from our previous speakers. XR technology, which is the umbrella term for AR, VR, MR, mixed reality, is being used across various industries. I was curious if I could hear from you guys about some of the applications of sort of these immersive technologies that you guys are very excited about, to give us a better flavor of kind of what's happening in this space. And with that, I can turn it maybe to you, Jackie, to start. And if you want to also sort of help us understand these applications in the context of what's AR versus VR versus MR, mixed reality.
Great. Yes, we talked a little bit about that in our introduction. I'm excited to tell you some of the things I've thought about. One area, particularly since I've been looking at youth and children, one area that has a lot of promise, that showed a lot of great potential, is in the medical field, particularly for kids. So if we think about pain distraction, it's an excellent, virtual reality, for example, specifically is an excellent pain distraction tool. And it's really great at having kids reduce their physical pain and their emotional pain. And it's wonderful to think about another tool where we could use to help children reduce their experience, their fears before the experience, through the procedures such as chemotherapy or burn wound care, and thinking about reducing the use of medicine like drugs for dealing with these anxieties and these pains that they have. And I have many other things I think about. I wonder about the social connections that we can make, particularly through education, how it can be a tool to supplement educational experience. So VR, it can block out the physical world. And I think that's why it's particularly great for a pain distraction tool, where it can transport someone somewhere else. But we have other technologies such as AR, where you can incorporate visual stimuli or other types of stimuli into your physical world. And so that could be interesting for classroom activities, to bring things in, to help understand and see inside different objects, or understand how engineering might work. And with mixed reality, using that more of that physical interaction with it. So adding additional objects as well as the visual stimuli, and creating that more physical approach to it, even though you can add haptics to VR and everything else. I think the exciting thing is to think about the different affordances of the technologies themselves. What benefits can we get from VR versus MR versus AR that can really facilitate these new areas? I'm excited to see what people latch on to, what they want to do, what they're excited about. I'm curious to see what everybody else has to say on the panel.
That was fast. So face your fears virtually before you face them in real life. That's fascinating. Owen, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a good question because you're right. A lot of people, when they think about virtual reality or augmented reality, do immediately think about gaming and the entertainment space, which I think is good. We at Microsoft are very excited about gaming, and I think there's actually a lot of positive application there. As Robbie mentioned in his introduction at the start, in the Seattle area, kids haven't been in school for almost a year now. And actually, I mentor an 11-year-old boy who lives not far from me, who hasn't seen his friends in over a year. He was very excited to get his virtual reality headset for Christmas and has been playing games throughout the year, and particularly over the last few months, to be able to interact with his friends in a really rich and fulfilling way that he wouldn't have been able to do had that technology not existed. So gaming is an exciting application, but you're right, there are lots of other exciting applications across society, and I think we do really see these immersive technologies as having really wide-ranging application. People might be familiar with the Microsoft HoloLens, which is an augmented reality headset that we have created at Microsoft. There are some really interesting industrial applications there. So we have a partnership with Mercedes-Benz, who are using the HoloLens headset to basically scale the expertise of their really specialist engineers. So they have Mercedes-Benz locations across the world, and sometimes a car will be brought in and there will be a problem with the car. They will have someone in the office who doesn't necessarily have a technical background as a mechanic, but they'll be able to put on the virtual reality or the augmented reality HoloLens headset, and with the cameras in the front, the mechanic, wherever they may be around the world, will be able to see exactly what the person in the location will be able to see, and then also using the holographic functionality of the HoloLens, be able to annotate what that person is seeing in their view. So they'll be able to point to different bits of the engine when the hood is up, and really talk them through how they're able to inspect and diagnose the car. So I think that's one good example. Another good example is in training, as was just mentioned above. We've got a partnership with Japan Airlines where they're actually using a HoloLens to help train their specialist mechanics on jet engines. You can imagine it's quite hard and quite expensive to take an enormous jet engine out of the air and have that set aside in some enormous classroom somewhere where mechanics can go and study it. But using the HoloLens, you're able to create a life-size image of the jet engine. And again, using the holographic functionality, you can play around with all the different component pieces that are very intricate and are buried right in the heart of the engine without having to disassemble a huge engine itself. One other application that I'll just mention quickly, which I think is particularly exciting, is in the healthcare space. So there's an organization called Medivis that we've partnered with, and they're using it in a surgical environment to assist them in doing cerebrovascular bypass surgery. So this is where you take a couple of blood vessels and try and fuse them together to increase blood flow. Really intricate procedure. They try and do it at the moment using ultrasound to pinpoint where the blood vessels are, which is really tricky because you're using big bits of equipment and it's not as precise as it could be. What they've now been able to do with the HoloLens is take a really high resolution CT scan and lay that over the patient so that the surgeon wearing the HoloLens as they're conducting the surgery can see exactly where those blood vessels are and are able to connect them in a much more straightforward and effective way. So this is technology that is already being used in those ways that I've talked about there, which we're very excited about.
Thanks, Owen. So it sounds like there's a lot of applications from both what you and Jackie and our previous speakers had said. Michelle, I'm going to turn it to you to talk about any applications you're excited about, but I also want to bring in the challenges question, because new technology, there's a lot of opportunities, but there are real challenges that we have to deal about. So yeah, can you talk about some of the applications that you're excited about? And then what are some concerns or challenges we face? And maybe we can get into the role of government in the following question, if that works for you, Michelle.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting example where often when you hear the industrial and enterprise examples, those are actually more interesting in a lot of ways than the consumer level applications that we hear about. If you think about technology as a way to improve society and make us work better. There are definitely a lot of challenges that we can have here. And it's so, to some extent what we see with other technologies. Will they just, those same problems be recreated here? but also, are there new ones? Are there new types of data or new volumes of data that are going to be involved that will pose novel threats? A couple of things that we'll be looking at closely. Number one is AI. Understand most of these tools will be run by AI, and so will they double down on AI bias? And that could happen in a couple of different ways. One is the data that it will collect and contribute to the bigger data ecosystem, whether that's online or to other devices. You know, a lot of decisions are made about people and offers are made to them for very important life opportunities based on the big data ecosystem. So will these devices be another data collection route that can be used in those ways that often discriminate against people? But also there's the question of, will the device and service itself discriminate? For example, we often hear about wearing glasses as you're walking down the street, which could give you recommendations about where you're going to eat or where you're going to shop and things you're going to interact with in the real world. Are we going to see there that often, like online experiences through either social media or advertising, are people going to be put in profiles and cabined in ways that reduce their opportunity to experience new things and have good opportunities put before them? We'll also need to be looking very carefully about whether this will be another way to centralize data collection. It felt like we made a big leap forward with smartphones and all the information that they were collecting, in no small part because it took the computer out of the home or the office and kept it with us at all times, and that just hugely increased the amount of time we were spending, added location into the mix, and just put a computer before us and had us use it in ways that we never did before. And I think there's a serious question about when you add on another layer that will allow for more passive collection in ways that cell phones are not able to now, will we be creating entire new streams of data that we're not prepared to deal with, and we're not thinking in advance how we can protect that data or use it in ways that are going to be fair to people and protect their privacy. You have unique challenges here also because this technology is not going to just affect the individual who's wearing it, but the rest of the world. Yeah. And that is one thing I would flag, is that we don't talk enough about bystanders and how we're going to interact with businesses or public spaces. Often when we hear people talk about AR, VR, and individual rights, it's about the actual wearer and the information collected about them. But this is really going to be interesting. With this turned out towards the world, it's going to be collecting more and different types of data that our smartphones are not. And I think it's going to pose a unique threat that we just want to keep an eye on as this develops.
Right, yeah, bias, privacy, and sort of bystanders, those are all important issues. And BPC's done a lot of work on AI. The bias and privacy issues are huge in that space. And you know, with emerging technology, they keep these issues keep coming back, and it's a matter of how we sort of grapple with them each time. With that, Jackie and Owen, do you want to talk about some of the challenges and concerns that you're thinking of before we get to sort of the question about the government's role?
I think, just as Michelle had mentioned before, it's really thinking about, I'll talk about this in a few ways. One, thinking about the data that is collected. And on one hand, it's great. The data is really necessary in terms of maximizing and creating a really great experience. And when I say data collection, I'm really focusing on tracking behavior. So where someone's head is positioned, how their body is moving, even where their eyes are looking, if you have devices that have eye tracking in it. And if you have really good systems that can respond really well to how people move and interact with the world, they really can really enjoy the experience. It's really effective. However, the question becomes, where is this data being collected? Who's looking at this data? You know, it's connected to other platforms, other things about your own personal life. You could, you know, these systems in a way could discover if you have a physical medical illness or disorder that you didn't even know about beforehand by collecting this data and linking it to other things as well. So again, what are the algorithms? What are the systems that are using this data? What kind of information are they getting from it? And then in terms of a broader issue with the world and getting these devices to other people, it's an issue of, you know, bandwidth, who has access to the systems, the hardware that can support these types of technologies. I know we're getting closer and closer to getting into being smaller and more affordable. I say now that you can get a headset, it's the cost of an iPad. When I first started out, I had a headset that weighed 10 pounds and it it costs $40,000. So we've come a long way, but again, it's still not necessarily a cheap thing to hold on to. And I think that's something we just need to be aware of. And one thing I really think about, particularly with youth, I know there's some age range in terms of where we're using these products and these platforms. But say you're even a 13-year-old, you still have a lot to learn about the world and how to navigate. And I think we'll talk more about this, but policymakers about what things we need to keep in terms of particularly children's privacy and their information about the acts that we have already and the loopholes that companies can get around. I'll stop there and pass it over to Owen.
And before I let you go, so let's also bring the role of government portion of the question. So what are some challenges, and then what role do you think the government should play in addressing the challenges, but then also sort of accentuating maybe some of the opportunities?
Sounds good.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I would firstly endorse everything that Michelle and Jackie have just mentioned. And also what Senator Young and Representative Delben mentioned at the top as well. I think with any new technology, that is as powerful as these immersive technologies, there are going to be challenges that you have to be mindful of. And so I think thinking about how you ensure that we have frameworks around things like privacy and security and respect for human rights that are up to date and relevant for new technologies is a really important thing to be looking at. This is something that we focus on very closely in the Office of Responsible AI. As I mentioned at the top, a big part of what we've been doing is thinking about what responsible governance systems look like for AI technologies that, of course, underpin a lot of these immersive technologies. So we've created things like a sensitive use case review internally, so that if there is a question around how an AI technology might be applied, we have a process internally that is very robust around how you come to a conclusion around whether it is the right time to be using that technology or maybe it isn't, and we do say no to working with customers in certain applications. We've also got a responsible AI standard that we built internally that has been being rolled out across the company, so that any person internally, whether it's at Microsoft Research, whether it's an engineer in one of the product teams, has a clear understanding of how they can be developing these new technologies in a way that is responsible. I build on what Michelle mentioned around the importance of privacy, maybe just to illustrate how challenging this conversation can be sometimes. We have a project that we developed called Project Tokyo that was for people with low vision. It's using the HoloLens headset, basically tries to help them better understand the world around them, and in particular try and have spontaneous conversations with people in a way that is maybe sometimes challenging for them. So it actually recognizes people that are in their immediate surrounding, alerts them to the fact that their friend is over there, and you might want to go and have a conversation with them. What we found is a real challenge is thinking about the tension between privacy and inclusion. So you want to build this technology to be as inclusive as possible for the person wearing it. And something that people with low vision often miss out on is the sort of known stranger phenomenon. So the person who lives 3 doors down, who, you know, if you're someone that has full vision, you know them a little bit and you wave to them, you say hello, but you actually don't know them that well. For the system to work well, you need to capture their face and put it into the system, but there's a real tension there between that privacy and inclusion piece. The last piece that I'd mention before turning it back over is just around access to these technologies. I think as we've seen throughout the pandemic, having internet access and access to digital technology is no longer a nice to have. It is absolutely essential if you're going to go about your day-to-day business. And over the last 12 months, if you haven't been able to work remotely, if you haven't been able to order food online, if you haven't been able to set up remote doctor's appointments, you've been at a real disadvantage. So I think ensuring that we have good basic infrastructure, and this is where government can, of course, play a real role, in addition to thinking about what those regulatory frameworks for the other pieces that I mentioned are, ensuring that we have really good, robust internet infrastructure is absolutely vital. There are still almost 20 million people in the US that don't have internet access. You're just simply not going to be able to make the most of these new technologies if you don't have a good internet connection. So I think in the same way that we wouldn't be satisfied with people in the US in 2021 not having access to electricity, we should think really hard about how we can accelerate access to the internet so that these technologies are usable by everyone.
Thank you. And Michelle, do you want to jump in on the sort of role of government in addressing the challenges, but also sort of taking advantage of the opportunities? What role should government play when it comes to immersive technology?
Yeah, we do need government to think about it now. I think we do not want to end up in a situation like we have with the entire AI ecosystem right now, where it was built into literally everything we interact with and use and do. And the harder thoughts about what's appropriate and what controls we need on it are coming too late. And it's very hard to rip out that sort of technology after the effect. So thinking about it now, and that means a few things. One means using it in your analysis of what certainly will be coming before this new Congress and the new administration. It feels like we are entering a moment of tech regulation. And so be it privacy or platform immunity, we need Congress and other decision makers to make sure they're not focusing just on things like social media and advertising. Those are kind of the things that really catch people's attention. But here's a great example of a rising technology that will be affected by all this regulation. And so it needs to be a use case that's on their list that they're going to evaluate about whether their laws are making sense. Definitely do not want to give a green light or a free pass to any single type of technology. So Congress really needs to be careful here. If it's not thoughtful about this, you end up sort of skipping the meritocracy of the market and investing in tools before we know if they're even going to work for what they say they are. We're finding in other examples that something are just not fit for purpose. They don't live up to the promises that vendors are making. And we don't want that to happen here, especially if we're talking about using it in really, really important places like schools or healthcare, right? It doesn't get much higher stakes than that. And we need to make sure that the government has the highest standards in its own procurement and use of these technologies. That's a fantastic way that government can shape the industry, but also serve its population and what it's supposed to be doing in the right way. And that's making sure that they are doing impact assessments, that they are following existing privacy laws and guidance, that they're following the Privacy Act, that they think about sharing between agencies. These are all things that the government should be thinking about before they start investing, developing, and purchasing these types of tools. An example that we can use here from work at CDT, this last fall, we did a report on the use of AI in public benefits determinations. And this is widely used in every single state now. They run your data through some sort of system to decide what types of public benefits you're eligible for. This is very different state to state. We really looked at home health care services through Medicaid. And it's frankly a mess. They can't even tell people how decisions have been made about them, whether there's any recourse, and there are actual constitutional challenges to these programs. There's problems with discrimination under existing statutes, but it's already out there, right? It's been built into all of these systems, and fixing it is going to take a very long time. It's going to be very difficult. So it's very important that before the government starts building this into their sorts of services and their programs, that they really get ahead of this and think about it before they do that.
Thank you, Michelle. And Jackie, do you have any comments on sort of the role of government when it comes to both addressing challenges and sort of taking advantage of opportunities with immersive technology?
Yes, this is a big area that's going to require a lot of people thinking from different spaces. I'm going to just highlight 3 areas that I think need some thought and discussion. When we briefly talked about in terms of data collection, who's holding this data, where is this data going? You know, how would this align with other things that are in place, such as HIPAA, really considering that. Second, thinking about advertisements and advertising, particularly with youth, thinking about COPA or COPPA, where we think about what advertisements, how kids are being tracked, what kind of information we're seeing tracked with them. And I wonder about advertisements in an experience like this for young kids, where you can just integrate ads for smoking, drinking, anything into the experience and the environment themselves. And then I would consider social interactions. You know, one of the largest social networking platforms owns a VR company. So Facebook and Oculus, I mean, thinking about integrating these types of technologies in these social settings, how are people interacting with each other? I can go into a space and look completely different. You don't know it's me. And we see when people have these anonymous profiles and anonymous actions, they can lash out. And one thing that goes back to our first question that I want to highlight, it could be the case that many of you have never tried any of these technologies before, and you might be thinking, oh, it's like a video game, it's like my computer, I know it's fake, I know it's not real. But once you really start interacting with these immersive and interactive technologies, your brain throws that out and it feels and reacts to these things as real. So we have to really consider, who are we interacting with? What kind of simulations are we doing? Are we going to be looking at hate groups in these spaces? Is that something where people are going to be reenacting different types of things? It could be negative, it could be positive, where people are learning to help each other. I just think we need to think about how these technologies, when and how they can be integrated in these other types of environments. We begin to connect more with each other.
Thanks, Jackie.
Could I just jump in, John, and maybe make a point about the responsibility of technology companies as part of the conversation?
Yes, of course.
As well. So I think, as we've talked about, there's a really important role that government can play. Up-to-date regulatory systems. I think investing in research is also important. Senator Young mentioned that at the top. I've talked about investing in basic internet infrastructure, and there's a big piece on skills that I think government can help with as well, making sure that people have the opportunity to study computer science, both in school and at college level, so that they can maybe make a career out of building some of this stuff, but also people who are already in the workplace, making sure that companies are incentivized to train their employees so that their skills are up to date and able to be deployed in high demand areas. In addition to that, I do think there's a really important role that technology companies can play, and there's a couple of parts to it. So I think firstly, sharing the knowledge around where the technology is actually going. This technology is developing at a very rapid rate. I think it's really important that technology companies think about how they share that knowledge with policymakers. And then there's also a point around being transparent around the technology. I think this touches on some of what Michelle was talking about. We try to be very clear that around our high impact technologies, so things like our facial recognition API, we actually have a transparency note that goes alongside that piece of technology that says, this is what it's good at, this is actually what it's not so good at yet, here are the conditions that it works well in, here are the conditions that it doesn't work so well in, and really try and be transparent as possible so that when people are taking that piece of technology and using it, they understand the shortcomings as well as the capabilities.
I completely agree on. I think that transparency, and you too, Michelle, I think that's just a huge issue, because I don't think it's going to be solved very quickly. I think once that conversation goes through about the needs and the purposes and what people can and cannot do, it's just going to be so crucial.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. Yeah, y'all make good points. Actually, that kind of brings us to the next question. I'm going to pose this to Michelle. So BPC has worked on AI issues and learned the critical role human values play in guiding new technology. Often we're the ones who sort of design, develop, implement these technologies, so it's important to put human values. What values should we have in mind when developing immersive technologies such as augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality? I know we've touched on a lot of this, but let's try to get in one question, if that works for you, Michelle.
Yeah. Well, the upside here is that we have so much to learn from, right? But there's really no excuse for ignorance now. We have so much information about what has already gone wrong in the last 10 or 20 years, where people are exploited or abused or bullied. And so we just need to carry that knowledge forward. And it's out there. It's with academics, it's with advocacy groups, it's with affected populations. And so we need to just tap into that vast experience and information as we develop these tools. So for example, when I think of when Jackie just said, will there be, hate groups? Absolutely, 100%. You can take that to the bank. I promise you that's going to happen. They find every corner of the internet. This will not be different from anywhere else, right? And so if we can just take those sorts of lessons and apply them and think more creatively, if that's the floor, what are the new threats even above and beyond that? That's what we need to do. If I could frame those all in one or two types of ways, I would say that it really is about fairness and equity. I think we need to move past sort of the way we thought about access just being an equal opportunity. If people can get on, if they can get in, if they can use it, well then They're left to their own devices of what happens to them, buyer beware, and we need to do better at anticipating that technology is never neutral. The decisions we're making about the data it's trained on, how the devices will interact with people, this is all going to change how people interact with it and their experiences. So we need to be careful of our defaults, right? When we are building the devices or the data, whose information are we using? Are we building things that are going to treat everybody fairly and at the end of the day? Not on the front end, but in the actual experience of the technology and the services. Are we thinking about power imbalances? You know, it's exciting to think of it in school or in work, but I think we have to look honestly about what the last year has been like. There are people without internet access, or they have it, but it's not fast enough, or there's not enough of it for everyone in their home to use it at the same time. Maybe they have internet access, but they don't have devices, right? Strapping some AR/VR onto those children is not going to help their educational experience if they can't even use the basic tools that are widely available now. Same thing with work, right? If it becomes part of a required training module for certain jobs, does that mean people who do not have access to this technology or the internet to make it worthwhile just don't get to apply and train for those jobs? So I think we need to be careful about thinking about the defaults of, you know, is this actually optional? It will be great that this may be something that over time becomes more widely used, but it's going to be a very, very long time down the road. In the meantime, are we making sure that there are ways for people to off-ramp into other things and have the same opportunities, even if they are not going to be able to use AR, VR? So those are some things I would recommend. It's, you know, nothing is promised. It's all really potential. And these decisions that we're making now are going to determine whether this technology repeats some of the mistakes of the past or if we're going to be able to do better this time around.
Thanks, Michelle. And Jackie or Owen, do you guys want to comment more on the sort of human values question? I know you've kind of touched on some of the human values, but want to see if you guys want to take a, another take on that question.
I was struck by one thing Michelle mentioned that I've been thinking a lot about. And I think this ties in with just thinking about companies in general. I think an important part that we need to think more broadly and figure out a way to incorporate it is community involvement and community feedback. So not just certain people that maybe work in the company or a really easy group of people you can grab to experience it, but some sort of way that we can get these technologies in various tech communities, particularly marginalized communities, where they can provide feedback and like opt into what, you know, maybe they want tracked, and they're really thinking about how different voices can be represented here. And then also going back to what you mentioned about these technologies need more support beyond, you know, as she mentioned, in terms of the actual hardware, the technology, the ability to even have the internet. Another thing to think about is just dropping this technology off and assuming people know how to use it and they have the right content for it. And so a big part of that is we don't, for example, education, we don't want to put the burden on teachers who are already trying to figure out how to do lessons plans and connect with students, having them try to, one, figure out this new technology itself, and one, how to create lessons in here. And so I think there needs to be some education in terms of supporting teachers. Maybe there's some grants or incentives that can be done with that, or finding groups that can really help companies, groups have the steps and the framework to know how to do things that will help people move in a positive direction and help them to use these tools in a way that is great for them and great for the rest of the community.
Thanks, Jackie. And Owen, do you want to talk a bit? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sure, no, I was just going to jump on and I think echo a lot of what Jackie and Michelle said. I do think the values conversation is really important. I mean, we are talking about increasingly sophisticated technology now that is really asking pretty fundamental questions about us as humans, how we want to structure society, how we want to interact with each other and with technology. So taking a step back and thinking about what the really important values that we want to imbue into this new technology, I think that's a really important thing to do. And that's why we try and take a sort of an approach that is based on principles, particularly in the work that I've been talking about in the Office of Responsible AI. So 3 years ago, we actually launched a set of 6 principles that governs the way we think about artificial intelligence. And the two bedrock principles are transparency and accountability, which we think are really important, in addition to other things that have been discussed here around the importance of fairness, the importance of inclusion, the importance of privacy, and the importance of safety and reliability. So that sort of values-based discussion, I think, is really fundamental.
Thanks, Owen. Before I move on to the next question, we're going to open up to audience Q&A in 5 minutes. I was reminded that you can also submit questions via Twitter using hashtag BPC Live. So you can submit questions via Twitter by hashtag BPC Live, in addition to doing it online via, I believe, Zoom or YouTube. So we'll open that up in, I think, 5 minutes or so. So let's continue with a couple more questions on my end. Immersive technologies we've kind of gathered from all these remarks we've heard, comments heard throughout the day are spreading quite a bit. The consulting firm PwC predicts that immersive technology has the potential to boost GDP by up to 1.5 trillion by 2030. That's a considerable amount of economic growth if it reaches the potential that PwC thinks it can. And it also means it's going to affect more people's daily lives. What should the average person, so someone who's not, working in Washington, coming to a think tank event, just the average person on Main Street, what should they know about the effect this technology will have on their daily lives, and what should they do to sort of prepare for that? And I can start with you this time, Michelle, if that works. This is the average person on Main Street.
And I don't have good notes for this. I've looked at this question since you sent it a couple of days ago, and I'm really kind of conflicted because I really don't know what it's going to look like in 2030, if it really will be as broadly distributed as people say now, right? I worry that this will be one of those things that will be a little more hype and that it won't be something that people interact with day to day. This is really something hard to predict. And I think that a lot of this, though, will come down to some of the exciting examples that were given in things like enterprise and industrial use. It seems like that's maybe going to get out in front of this more than the commercial space, the way things are being described. But I guess we'll have to keep an eye out on this. I want to see what the value is for the more general consumer market. I feel like there's so much data coming into our lives already. I need another restaurant recommendation, like I need another hole in my head, right? So when I, as a human being who may use these, I look at some of these proposals and I was like, more? I don't know. So I'm going to wait and see really what the value add is before I'm going to be able to, predict what 10 years is going to look like on this one.
As they say, what is it called? Projections are hard to make, especially about the future. That's the Yogi Berra quote, I believe. So this is just a projection, just to throw that some people think is going to be a very big thing. Now, how big it is, it's hard to tell what's the reality versus the hype. But the real question is more about how people on Main Street should be thinking about these technologies. If it's going to be as ubiquitous as maybe some predict, or if it's not, it will still be something that's around us. So the Main Street question, I'll sort of turn it to you, maybe Jackie. What would you tell the average person on Main Street who's kind of curious about augmented reality, virtual reality, and the effect it might have and what they might want to do to prepare?
One thing, some encouragement, because I ask people, I tell people what I research. It's getting a little bit more clear. Everyone's like, VR, I don't get it. What is that? What do you use that for? How does it work? And I think it's getting more and more into the conversation. But one thing I would say for people just learning more about this and getting excited about it is just think about these as tools and technology you can integrate into your life, not replace your life. So I've worked with, some high school students, and when we were bringing it into the classroom, one student was a little bit afraid to put it on because I think, what's going to happen to me? You will not be sucked into the matrix. If it's scary, you can close your eyes. Just be encouraged and just know it's something that you can have experiences that can enhance what you're doing. Maybe flying through space with someone and connecting with them, doing things that you weren't able to do before, thinking about as an enhancement, not something you need to be in there for hours at a time at this point. So don't necessarily think about it as I'm getting sucked in and I must stay there. A second thing I would encourage people when they start to try it, I always tell this to my students as well, is try to break it. Try to do things you didn't think were possible, jump around, dive around, find the edges of this technology, because that's going to help us make it better and for you to experience it. Try things you couldn't do in the physical world. These are tools that are changing your reality in a different way. We've heard a lot of examples about this. I just say go for it. Don't be afraid.
Thanks, Jackie. So, Owen, and do you have any comments for the average person on Main Street, maybe how they should be thinking about this technology as it sort of comes about?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a really important question. I think making sure that as many people know as much about the opportunity of technology as possible and how to use it and have access to it is absolutely fundamental. I think one thing we really want to avoid is new and sophisticated technologies being just the preserve of large, well-capitalized companies or certain governments or whatever it may be. I think you do want to be able to diffuse this technology as far and as wide as possible. And as Jackie was saying, encourage people to get creative and unleash the fantastic creative forces of as many people as possible. And I think there are huge opportunities that extend to every aspect of society, as we've been discussing. One of the last case study, I guess, that I'll share from our side, which I think is really interesting, and in my experience helps bring to light exactly what this technology is all about and what it can help you do, is a project that we've done with a number of people from across the Middle East, actually trying to create a 3D reconstruction of Palmyra, so the ancient ruins in Palmyra, which is in Syria, which has sadly been destroyed because of the conflict in Syria. And by taking a number of different images of what those ruins look like, I've actually been able to build up a 3D life-size replica of the ruins that, using the HoloLens, you're able to experience almost as if you were able to go there yourself. So as Jackie was saying, it's really exciting to think about how you're able to transport people and their minds and their imaginations to various different places across the world and even beyond. So I think making sure that as many people know about this technology, as many people have access to this technology as possible, so that they can be creative with it and use it in their own lives, is a really, really important part of the conversation.
Hey, thanks, Owen. So I'm going to start taking some questions from the audience. We got a few. So I have a question about content moderation. So at a very high level, how should we think about, so there's discussion on content moderation when it comes to social media today. With XR technology, content moderation will evolve, but it will still be an issue. Does anyone want to take the question of how should we be thinking about content moderation in a immersive world? That's an open question. And I can maybe ask another question or two if you guys want. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's a big question. I'm going to kick it off to everyone on the panel here, because I think about it in a few different ways. Are we talking about moderation in terms of people coming into a world where they are interacting live with other people, or forming groups where they do that? And there's content moderation in the sense of rulings and labeling of content, of who has access to what's appropriate. And then I think about content moderation as people get better at creating their own content and posting it. Yeah. This is an extreme example, but the example of child pornography. I mean, if someone's making content and it's made from a virtual character, is that the same? I mean, that's a kind of a fuzzy gray area. And it's hard to think about right now. And so I think there's going to have to be different ways to think about what content moderation means in terms of who has exposure to what. How do we moderate content and live? Again, this might be another AI question here as things are going on. So that's a big question that it's going to require a lot of different people from different areas coming together to really talk about this, to continue to talk about this.
Yeah.
That's tough. And I think one thing we could just peg to make sure that people are thinking about is, I think a lot of the friction in the content moderation is when people are put in places, in contexts with people they either don't interact with or have problems with. And, do we amplify that in some ways with the physical interaction and being in places, right, that you normally wouldn't communicate with people if you are going to be wearing, let's say, something in like a glasses format as a default as you walk around. What does that mean now that you're available to everybody who's on your bus, or you pass on the street, or people that you wouldn't actually choose to interact with? So I think it'll be another dimension that we'll have to think about that will be even more complicated than just the ones that we have about online communities where people choose to post comments.
Okay.
So I would only echo that. I think it is a really important part of the conversation, particularly when it comes to children, and particularly when you think about some of the sort of the gaming applications that children are going to be really excited about and are probably going to be engaging in by themselves. I think definitely creating the right guardrails. It's a really challenging conversation, but it's really important to do. And I think this is where coming back to the values conversation is important as well, sort of thinking about how you tie back to those underpinning values of how we want to use technology when we're building those guardrails is going to be really important. And the content moderation piece is right at the forefront of those important conversations to have.
Right, let's take another question. Okay, so we have a question about sort of using XR immersive technologies for training. So what do you think about AR, VR as a training tool for jobs like a dentist or chiropractor? I think we kind of touched on it, but if someone else wants to sort of talk about the use of AR, VR, MR, XR for training purposes, feel free to jump in again.
Yeah, I could just quickly sort of reiterate some of the points I was making previously. We certainly see that in the industrial applications, this is one of the most common applications. It's a really fantastic way to scale expertise and to scale training. You can have simultaneous training all at the same time. And again, in those challenging industries, whether it's either very difficult to get to a place or very dangerous to get to a place, or in the case that I mentioned with Japan Airlines, phenomenally expensive to take a $10 million engine out of the sky and do training on it. We're seeing it used very effectively in those industries. So I think things like dentist, chiropractor, other vocations where you need specialist skills and people need to be trained up. Sure, I think the training application is one that we'll continue to see be used very effectively with this technology.
Thank you. And I notice we're running short on time. So I have one last question before we sort of wrap this all up, which is sort of the final comments. Based on sort of everything you've done up until this event and this event, what's your final message to everyone watching about XR? And I can start with you, Jackie, and then go from there if that works.
Yes, I would say it's not just a video game. It's something more than that. It's something that can be integrated into our lives and change the way and transform how we experience medicine and education, and thinking about it as a place, again, as something that can enhance and not necessarily replace how we live and interact with human beings. I still like to connect with people when I can face to face. So just know that it's for anyone and everyone. I think that's important. I never thought, when I was growing up that I'd end up doing this. So you can do it, and it can be integrated in a lot of interesting ways. Just take your time and be thoughtful about the application. Just don't throw the technology at it.
Okay, so not just a video game. I like the remark. Michelle, what's your sort of final takeaway for today?
Yeah, to the extent we have developers and lawyers and advocates and everyone else watching today, just want to remind them how rare it is to get in on the ground level as something develops, and the opportunity to do this right without bias, inclusively, to respect privacy. We at CDT, of course, are always happy to work with you on that and making sure that that is built into all steps of your development. But this is an exciting time, and there's a lot of potential here, and we're looking forward to see how it turns out.
Thanks. So yeah, exciting time. Let's do things right. That kind of, I think, is a good way of putting it. And Owen, sort of, what's your final comment or takeaway for today?
I would agree with that for sure. Exciting time. Let's do things right. And I'd also say a big thank you to the Bipartisan Policy Center for putting this type of event on. I think having this conversation at an early stage while the tech is still developing and spreading knowledge about it amongst policymakers and people more broadly is a really important thing to be doing, and something we should be doing more of. I do think, again, just reiterating that there's been huge progress over the last few years, but we are just at the start of this immersive technology journey, and it will be fantastic to see how creative people can be creative with it over the coming years. And finish on this point of access. I mean, to allow people to be creative with it, they have to have access to the infrastructure that underpins it. We talked about the internet. They have to have the ability to develop the skills to be able to use it, and the technology has to be affordable as well. So making sure that we have access to this powerful new technology is really important as well.
Thank you. And with that, I want to thank our entire panel for joining us for this fascinating conversation. I also want to thank our partners, the XR Association, for sort of helping us put this event together. Further, I want to thank a few people who this event would not have been possible without Nina Ladonio, Corinne King, Alex Trollope, and our vendors who sort of helped do the logistics for this, which is possibly the hardest part of getting these events together. So thank you to you guys. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us to watch this event. I learned a lot. I thought it was a fascinating discussion, and I hope you guys did as well. And we look forward to seeing you guys next time. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you, John.
Thanks very much. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.